And to our first-time guest, the always exciting and very bold George Conway, we are very excited to hear from you tonight as well. Of course, welcome and thanks to the amazing Warren Olney, tonight's moderator. This week we welcome Passover, a holiday which mandates us to retell and rehear the core story of the Jewish people's journey from slavery to freedom. There is so much to talk about when it comes to Passover, but I will simply mention this. Each year, we are obligated to tell the story. We all know the story, but we need to tell it and we need to hear it not just on one night, but for 2 consecutive nights. The point is, we all need to be continuously reminded and continually re-inspired to fight for what is right, to fight for freedom and for justice. The same is true with our fight for American democracy. Some of our audience members erroneously comment that we are preaching to the choir, and that really isn't true. Our audience is diverse and becomes more diverse as we broaden our audience through our expanding use of social media. In fact, over the last several weeks, some of our programs have attracted up to 40,000 viewers via our postings on YouTube. And I know from the emails I get that they don't all agree with everything that our guests say, and our guests themselves are diverse. But even if it were true, namely, even if everyone listening was of one mind, and again, I know for a fact that that isn't true, we all need to be reminded, retold, and re-inspired. So we wish you a very happy and meaningful Passover. Next week, we will welcome UCLA law scholar John Michaels. He just wrote a book called Vigilante Nation, The Subversion of American Democracy. He will be in conversation with Madeline Brand. Now, without any further ado, please welcome the great broadcast journalist and one of our regular wonderful America at a Crossroads moderators, Warren Olney. Warren, the program is yours.
Well, thank you, Janice, and thank you so much for those kind words. Today, as you indicated, we have two dedicated and united never-Trumpers in Sarah Longwell and George Conway III. I should say at the outset that George will be audible but not visible. He is not able to get to a camera tonight. Sarah Longwell is a former Republican. She's publisher of The Bulwark, which provides reporting and analysis in defense of America's liberal democracy. It features newsletters and articles and podcasts and YouTube videos. She is also behind groups called Republican Accountability and Republican Voters Against Trump, which spent millions to help stop President Trump's re-election in both 2020 and 2024. George Conway is an attorney. He's a contributor to The Atlantic. He is co-host of the Bulwark's podcast, George Conway Explains It All, and he explains it to Sarah Longwell. He has been called one of President Trump's leading conservative critics. And last year, he founded the Anti-Psychopath Political Action Committee, which says it will shine a light on Trump's vulnerabilities with targeted advertising, including billboards and digital ads. So thank you both for being with us. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to ask you questions. And I think we have to start with the latest surprise from the White House, although who knows, there may have been another one since I saw this one. But it is, of course, that the president has said today that he's going to pause for 90 days the reciprocal tariffs that he instituted less than a week ago. He told reporters that people were getting a little yippy and a little queasy because of turmoil in the financial markets. And of course, the stock markets immediately shot up to an amazing degree. So, Sarah, let me go to you first and ask, is this going to be seen as a victory for the president?
I mean, he'll try to do that, but this is Trump's MO, right? It's like he creates a crisis and then he solves the crisis, and then declares victory. I don't know, though. Here's the thing. The markets today and whatever money people made in the markets today with its rebound, that doesn't account for the cost to America's credibility and to the U.S. economy over the long term that comes from people no longer being able to trust us, right? One of the things that makes America a good investment is that we have things like the rule of law. We have checks and balances. We have things that create a level of stability, right? Like China produces a lot of things, but they don't have the rule of law, right? So, China, you can shut down a company for any reason at any time. that can't happen in America typically, and that makes us a good investment. It's a reason that in Vietnam they take our money when we buy goods from them that they produce, and then they turn around and take the money they made from us, those US dollars, and they buy treasury bills with them, right? Because we are a big, stable economy. And Trump has taken that stability both in terms of global markets and also in terms of our foreign policy, in terms of being a good ally. And he's basically cratered that. And so this short-term bounce to me is basically meaningless, right? Trump saying, well, the markets got spooked and everyone's yelling at me and all the, CEOs are yelling at me. And even up until last night, he's saying, absolutely not. I'm not backing down. I won't change this. And of course he did. This is not a win for him. This is him blinking. This is him caving. This is him not having the stomach to basically follow through with this thing he really wants to do, which is impose major tariffs. And I'll just say one last thing about the way that he did the tariffs. He and his supporters gave 3 separate analytical reasons why they were doing the tariffs, and they don't work together. Either he is trying to fundamentally remake the American economy and reshore jobs over here. That's one thing that he says he's going to do, and he said that, or he's trying to negotiate and bring people to the table. That's the second explanation that was given, and that's what he declared victory on today. Of course, there's no evidence that he negotiated anything. And then the third is the idea that we're going to use this money that we make from tariffs to pay off our debt. Well, you can't do all 3 of those things. All 3 of those things can't exist in the same universe. And so Trump didn't have a plan. And so he was reckless with the US economy, and all the jump in the markets today, that's just relief. That's just the market sign with relief. But this is just one day. I think we're back to this sooner or later.
Let me go to George Conway on the question of negotiation. They are saying, the White House is saying 75 countries have been trying to make deals. The Treasury Secretary said today that this was his strategy all along. It took great courage for him to stay the course until this moment. And the press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, told reporters that they have clearly missed what is really the art of the deal. How do you respond to that?
It's bullshit. And I think the basic thing is, when anybody ever tells you that there is a strategy, that Donald Trump has a strategy, they are wrong. There is never a strategy. There is never a coherent rationale for and Sarah gave a perfect rendition of why there was no clear rationale here. What Donald Trump does is he does things for his own ego. And he did this because he loves the fact that he can sign a piece of paper and cause markets to gyrate and cause people to get upset and cause chaos. And then he likes pulling back because then he can, as Sarah points out, he can declare a victory and say, look, I'm the hero. Look, I made the stock market go up. But sooner or later, he's going to get back to wanting to push the button once again and go back and forth. And that's, he's completely erratic. It's all about getting attention and doing whatever strikes him in the moment. We saw that with the Canada and Mexico tariffs, and we're going to see it again with these global tariffs. And again, the problem is he can't undo the damage that he's already done. And I echo and agree with what Sarah said. I mean, the inconsistency of his policy and the incoherence of his policy is driving people to lead them to the conclusion that they should have reached already, is that he is not a rational actor and that he's a destructive actor. And in the words of one analyst, people on Wall Street are wondering whether he is sane. Well, he is not sane, and he is going to continue to engage in this kind of erratic conduct, and that's going to deter investment in the United States. And we already, the stock market went up, but it's not clear that the bond markets are going to recover. That's the thing we have to watch. I mean, this is an economic point, and I'm just a lawyer, and it's not a political point either, but the question is whether there's going to be capital flight from the United States and flight from the dollar. And I think, unless people can be guaranteed tomorrow that these tariffs will not come back in any way, shape, or form, which they can't because they're still on with China, which is a substantial trading partner and makes a lot of cheap things that we like to buy, we're going to see continued chaos and upset in the markets.
So, Sarah, let me ask you to go back to the bond market issue. It's my understanding that the president did say that he was concerned about what was happening in the bond market. Why do you think the president was concerned? What's the specific issue?
Because unlike the regular fluctuation of the markets, the bond market is much more an indication of, do people think that America is a safe place to put money?
That's a
right?
credibility issue.
That's right. That's that credibility. And so it's a marker. It's like if your blood test, you see this thing shooting up, and it's like, it's not one of these short-term things. This is a long-term dire prospect. And so I think that somebody clearly got to him and said, like, this is deeper than just, do people have the stomach for the market to go up and down around, your whims on tariffs? This is about people losing faith in the American economy as being a leader, a stable leader in the world. And that was freaking out some of the most sophisticated investors in a way that I think is different from just regular market fluctuations.
Well,
Yeah, and I also want to add to that just one thing is like the increase in treasury yields can directly impact the cost of servicing the debt of the United States of America, which is substantial. If people don't buy treasury securities, we're in deep, deep trouble. And if they buy them only at high rates, we're also in deep, deep trouble because our borrowing costs go up and we have a budget deficit. And nothing that Elon Musk can do or will do will help that.
You mentioned Elon Musk, and I wonder, Sarah says we're not clear who got to the president, but there has been this very public dispute between Elon Musk and Peter Navarro, who's one of the few economists who actually advocates tariffs. Went to prison for Trump during the first administration. Now he's back in the second administration. Elon Musk has been saying publicly that he's dumber than a stack of bricks. To what extent do you think that might have impacted the president's decision, George?
Yeah, I don't think that would have impacted the president's decision, because again, I don't think he's acting for rational reasons. He wants to do this because he wants to do it, and he gets a thrill out of doing it. And criticism of Peter Navarro isn't going to make a difference to him. And we will be back with these tariffs sooner or later. When somebody else talks to Trump and he's in the mood to do something, to get in the news again, he will reinstate these tariffs as he did with Canada and with Mexico.
And Sarah, what about the money that has been lost since the tariffs were first announced? The figure of $6 trillion has been floated around. Is that going to be recoverable?
Well, I mean, some people who stayed in the market or who bought the dip, they're recovering some of it. But I guess this is really my fundamental point on this, which is I don't think you can measure in immediate dollars and cents the loss of trust in America. And as long as people feel like the markets are going to be dictated by the id and whims of Donald Trump, like, let's just say hypothetically, you said, oh, Trump says, I am definitely doing this. I am not backing down. Okay, I'm going to start construction on that factory, that car factory here, because we're going to reshore these jobs. And then Trump's like, oh, no, I'm just kidding. Who's investing today now in the idea of long-term reshoring of American jobs? Nobody, because that level of erratic behavior. And I think, there are people who are going to tell themselves that they knew Trump was posturing the whole time. But like, you can't put it past Trump to do this just because he gets bored and likes seeing every statement that he makes move the markets by trillions of dollars. And so like, that's no way to run a country, guys. No way to run the world's biggest economy.
So do you agree with George's assessment of the president and his mental condition?
Well, yes, I do agree with that. I'd say the thing about Elon that was interesting to me, his fight with Peter Navarro, is yes, Elon was fighting with Navarro, but Navarro's kind of a proxy for Trump in this because Trump and Navarro like agree with that assessment. And so I do think that Elon was complaining, and Elon, more than just about anybody I've ever seen, does have Trump's like nervous about Elon because Elon controls a major platform and also has a lot of even though he's sort of tanking his credibility, like in Silicon Valley, he's still God. Like you put Elon Musk on something, people think they're going to make a lot of money. And so his opposition, I do think matters to some degree. I'm not sure that Elon got to him. I think it was probably cumulative, but I don't think that Elon is like meaningless in this.
George, what about the conflicts that have been assessed or the conflicts that have been pointed out that Elon Musk has, given the extraordinary value of the contracts that he has with the federal government, with his various enterprises? And why do you think more hasn't been made of that, particularly by the Democrats?
Well, I think more hasn't been made about it because there's just so much to make out of so many different things. I mean, there's the fact that his appointment is illegal. There's the fact that what he is doing is gutting various agencies and the efficacy of various agencies. And I think there has been a lot actually that's been talked about how he is, cutting things that are going to hurt normal people, including people who are on Social Security, while at the same time he is profiting from government contracts. I mean, I don't think it has gone without note, but we have an administration where none of that matters at all. None of that conflicts of interest don't matter. There are no ethics rules. The Department of Justice isn't going to prosecute anybody in the administration for doing anything, no matter what it is, regardless of whether or not it would have been prosecuted by a prior administration, unless it has something to do with, unless Trump feels personally aggrieved in some way. So, that where we are with Elon Musk is he finally said something useful when he talked about Navarro, but don't expect much else from him.
Sarah, another event that occurred today was the announcement that two people are going to be investigated, people that I think you know, Miles Taylor and Chris Krebs. Tell us about that, how the announcement came about, and your analysis of it.
Yeah, so this is one of those really, truly insane things where Donald Trump was holding a meeting in the Oval Office. Gretchen Whitmer, the Democratic governor from Michigan, was there. And she was there to talk about some military-based things in the Oval Office. But Trump makes her stand over to the side while he starts signing these executive orders with cameras on him. And he signs these executive memorandums saying that Miles Taylor, who was deputy in the he worked on immigration issues. I'm blanking on the name of the woman who was the chief at the time, but he was the guy who was like anonymous. He wrote an op-ed in the New York Times. He then wrote a book. He eventually came out and said who he was, and was very critical of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump said that he was going to have the Department of Justice investigate him, saying that he was a traitor. And my favorite part was that he said he, leaked classified information, which after Signalgate, which we only stopped talking about because Trump was crashing the world economy. I'm not sure that Trump's, the most credible person, especially since he keeps a lot of, national secrets in his bathroom at Mar-a-Lago. But him going after Miles, but most importantly, Chris Krebs. So Chris Krebs is a really good guy. He ran basically the cybersecurity around the 2020 election. And his grave sin that Trump is signing executive memoranda about, saying he needs to be investigated. His great sin is that he said the 2020 election was good, was legit, was everything was done well, above board, there was no fraud, and Trump lost. And the reason that this is so frightening and pernicious is that Trump is sending a signal saying that if you leak, which Trump's administrations are notorious for leaking, because leaking is one of the ways which people inside his administration curb his worst impulses, right? They put it out there. This was just a real feature of the first administration. Like, he's going to do this bad thing. You get the public reaction. That gets him off the scent, makes him stop doing the thing. Trump is trying to make it clear, hey, I'm going to come after you. And this is his retribution agenda, right? These are just petty things that, where he's got like a bee in his bonnet about people who told the truth about him. And so he's going to go get them and have them investigated by DOJ. Like, this is the authoritarian stuff. Like, it's not, these aren't close calls. These aren't the kinds of things that, you just say like, well, maybe no, this is not a close call. He's got the DOJ investing people who criticized him publicly, politically, and that's why he's after them. And it's one of those things that might get lost in the Trump pulled back the tariffs news, but it shouldn't, because this is the scary stuff.
And what exactly are they being investigated for?
Well, he accused Miles Taylor of treason and leaking classified information. I'm not sure he had a clear accusation on Chris Krebs. Chris Krebs did, like, I don't think Miles did either. I think Miles is just guilty of criticizing Donald Trump and saying things while he was still working there. But Chris Krebs, that is outrageous. Like, this is him going after Chris Krebs just because he said the 2020 election was free and fair. And so he's going to have them, investigate it. What they're going to do is they're going to like go through all their taxes. Like, they're going to just make their lives miserable for no reason, to send a message that anybody who speaks out against Trump could face the same fate.
George Conway, what about this method of ordering the Justice Department to do something, bringing the cameras around to watch the signing of the order? How does that comport with the relationship between the White House and the Justice Department since the Nixon years? Hasn't there been much more of a separation of those powers, and is that another feature of the Trump administration?
Yeah, I mean, it's another feature. What had developed over the last 50 or 60 years is a degree of restraint by the executive. I mean, the executive obviously appoints the attorney general. The attorney general reports to the executive, and he can be fired by the executive. But there have been some written and unwritten rules about what the White House can do with respect to, and they're written up in Justice Department guidelines and written up. There are unwritten rules also, and those are out the door. And even Bill Barr stood by those rules to some extent, and he resisted the urge in most cases, for Trump to bring prosecutions against people, although he did appoint a special counsel that conducted a ridiculous investigation for a long period of time into the Russia investigation. But now Trump believes that the Justice Department is his tool for retribution, and he makes no secret about that. And the people who now work for him at the Justice Department make no secret that they too believe that that's what their function is. And hence we have Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and Emil Boveg.
Well, let me ask you as a lawyer, the president has taken on law firms that represents clients that he doesn't like for one reason or another, and demanded certain things from the firms, and said that lawyers might lose their security clearances or be prohibited from entering federal buildings where courts are located. And he has also threatened to take federal money away from the clients so they wouldn't be able to pay the lawyers. What's going on here? And is this something, is this an insidious kind of attack on the rule of law, or is it just Trump exercising the kind of personal animosity that you've both referred to?
It's both. He is both exercising, and he's both engaging in retribution through the use of the Justice Department, and it is also a grave threat to the rule of law, because he's using these law firm executive orders to threaten law firms by making them unable to do business with the United States in some fashion. For example, he's revoking that one method that he's using in these executive orders is to revoke security clearances. That affects some people, but he's also saying that they can't enter courthouses. I don't know to what extent he's going to be able to effectuate that. He's also saying that people in the administration have to restrict the degree to which they deal with individuals represented by these law firms. And what's happened is a number of law firms have essentially caved by making promises to engage in, I mean, maybe it's ice and winter, but they're promising to engage in pro bono activities of which the administration approves. And the problem with all this is, first of all, it's unconstitutional. He has no authority to do any of this. It's also a violation of the First Amendment to the extent he is punishing law firms for engaging in activities that he does not like because he thinks they are politically opposed to him. And what it also does is it deters law firms from rendering services to people the president doesn't like. And it's been quite effective. He's gotten about 4 or 5 law firms to cave. And I think the reason is those law firms are the law firms. And I say this as a New York lawyer who did takeover litigation for a long time. These are the New York law firms and there's also one Chicago law firm that has, that are involved in mergers and acquisitions activity and make a lot of money off of that. And the fear is that people won't be able to get their deals through the Justice Department or the FTC if he manages to exercise control of that, or other agencies. And that has a powerful impact on these firms' bottom lines and on their willingness to cave. And he's doing it because, obviously he wants to punish some of these law firms, although in some cases it's rather tenuous because the people whose activities he objected to are no longer at the firm. For example, at Perkins Coie, the law firm in the Washington state-based law firm that was hit first. But it really has a terrible effect on lawyers who might take on representations that the Trump administration doesn't like.
I should tell you, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but your image appeared on our screens.
It did, because I got out of my vehicle and now I am in my house, and I'm sorry if the lighting isn't all that great, but this is the best I'm going to get.
My lighting isn't any good. It isn't any good either, and you look fine. Pardon me. I just want to ask. I have heard it argued that this attack on the rule of on the lawyers, the firms, and on the judges, and the demand that judges that make decisions that the president doesn't like be impeached, and that kind of language is part of a strategy that resembles what happened in Hungary and in Poland, where the legal system was ultimately taken over. And autocracy resulted. Do you see that pattern?
Yes, I mean, I think it is. He's trying to deter opposition from legal forces. He's also seeking revenge on the legal system because the legal system tried to hold him to account and is trying to check the excesses and the illegalities of his administration. So he is battling the legal system, and therefore, because lawyers are officers of the court and lawyers have been at the forefront of raising objections to his illegal behavior, they are bearing the brunt of some of these attacks.
Sir, I want to ask you about the bulwark and the things that you do there, particularly the focus groups that you gather. And what are you hearing from them, and how does it develop? How do things change as one event occurs after another? First, of course, the election, and since then, the tariff issue and other such things. How do people respond, and how do different groups respond in different ways?
Yeah, so obviously, when you got Trump voters versus Democrats, they respond very differently to these things. But I'll take Democrats first because the episode of the focus group that's coming out this weekend, we talked to 2 different groups of Democrats. We asked Democrats who thought that the party should be more moderate. Like we looked for a group that said, hey, I'm a Democrat, but I think the party should be more moderate going forward. And then another group who said the party needed to be more progressive going forward. And the big takeaway from talking to both of those groups is that actually, I'm not sure. They sounded basically the same. I'm not sure that they cared that much about moderate versus progressive. What they wanted was Democrats to be more aggressive. Like they were so angry at Democrats' level of inaction in the face of what Donald Trump was doing, that it doesn't surprise me there were millions of people in the streets. And it's so interesting More to come soon, but we are going to launch something soon that is sort of steeped in the thesis that while elites are very afraid, and I don't mean to point at myself, but like the people that we talk to at these law firms, the people that we're talking about, like who've worked in Republican administrations, Republican Congress people, they're all so scared of Trump, right? But average people, they're not that scared. They don't think Trump's going to throw them in a gulag. I mean, some people are, right? Trump's trying to operate in fear, but regular everyday Americans are so much braver than the elite class that we are dealing with right now across the board in a lot of ways. And so the Democrats were just beside themselves. Now, another group that I talk to really frequently are the Biden to Trump voters. So these are kind of your swingier voters who basically voted for Trump because they're like, look, Biden was too old. Kamala was just going to be more of the same. And I think things are too expensive. And I'm worried about inflation. Trump's a businessman. And I just want that pre-COVID economy back. And those are the first people that say they're not MAGA, right? Like there is a group of MAGA voters that they will be living on the streets. They will be, clothesless. They will be homeless, right? Trump will have bankrupted them, but they will be wearing their red hat and they will wear it until the day they die, right? They are part of a Trump cult. But there's this other class of people that's quite large that was just like, I don't know, I want things to be cheaper. And so those people are looking at what's happening with the economy. And this is why you see in polling right now, Trump is tanking in terms of his handling of the economy. People think he is not paying enough attention to it. And that's what I hear from these voters. They are frustrated. And right now, they're very scared about the tariffs. What's interesting is sometimes with complex financial things, voters are like, I don't know. Tariffs, people understand. They just do. Like if your average voter sort of gets it. And you hear people talking about like, well, I was going to buy a new car, but now I don't feel like I can because it's going to be so much more expensive. And so I would say Trump has had one of the shortest honeymoons ever as a president. And you can see his approval rating starting to tank. That's what I hear in the focus groups is a lot of these swingier voters are just really frustrated with his handling of the economy. And that, though, is a problem for Trump because that's the mythology of Trump, right? The carefully curated businessman. If he loses that, Trump doesn't have that much else except for the cult.
George Conway, should the elites, the people who think they might be afraid, are they right? Should the other people be more concerned about what the consequences of Trump's actions might be?
You mean should the elites be, or should
No,
other
should
people?
should the people who aren't elite?
Well, I mean, I don't think they have a fear of retribution that people who he knows by name and who have criticized him might have. But they should fear the fact that he does not care a whit about their well-being. And he demonstrates that almost every day by, these tariffs, which are just completely arbitrary and were destined to not restore manufacturing to the United States, but to put people who are in manufacturing and other jobs out of work, people with sales jobs who sell goods from other countries. And he's threatening, he has Doge causing harm at the Social Security Administration. The Social Security Administration system is now under stress in terms of its operations. It could, there are going to be people in large sections of the United States who can no longer call their Social Security office because it's being closed or because they're no longer taking phone calls. There are all sorts of things and services and functions of the government that are going to be put in jeopardy because of him. And that's what they should be afraid of.
Okay, let me go to the chat questions that are being asked by people who've been watching and listening to you. First of all, we have Terry who says, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Let me go to Ruth. Ruth says, isn't what Trump doing basically market manipulation? And if so, isn't that illegal? George, you have a point on that?
Well, yes, it would be illegal if he were either engaging in or helping others engage in trading based upon inside information, based upon his decisions. And I think there's a lot of people who suppose that that's what he is doing. But again, I always adhere to it's sort of the Occam's rule of Trump, which is the simplest explanation is just he's just engaged to explain his arbitrary behavior is just he's engaging in arbitrary behavior. I don't think there's a plan to do that. It may well be that there are people doing it. I don't think he would have a moral compunction against doing it or anyone doing it as the result of his actions, but I don't think that's what's going on here.
Sarah, we have a question from a number of people who want to know why you think, or do you think, that Republican members of Congress and the Senate are going to begin to turn on Trump at some point. Many of them are apparently telling people off camera or without being recorded that they have a lot of problems with what Trump is doing, but they're not saying anything in public.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We've been at this for 9 years of the off the record, behind closed doors. And George and I have lots of conversations because back in the day, before they ran out all of the people who then were willing to speak up, those are the people George and I knew, right? And those people, they eventually they spoke out, but for a long time, they also said these things off the record. And so, like, look, are Republicans, elected officials, going to break with Trump? Not unless Republican voters abandon him. Right. And so until you see Trump down at a level that is, 32%, something that is perilously low, that looks like his support has cratered among sort of average. But as long as he owns that base, Republican electeds are going to be afraid of him, and he can end their career anytime he wants by saying primary them. So, no, they're not going to stand up to him. Now, I will say, there is a group of like a handful of senators, Mitch McConnell, Collins, Murkowski, who are trying to do something on the tariffs, trying to take some of their congressional power back, but it's not enough. I mean, it's like if those 7 of them, like they're not going to get there in the House. Mike Johnson knows that he is in his role there, but for the grace of Donald Trump. And so, until the voters abandon him, you're not going to see major pushback from these elected officials. I have no faith in them.
George, I saw a big grin on your face when when Sarah started to answer this question.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this and going round and round about this for I don't know how many years now, but Sarah's absolutely right. I mean, these people, they're motivated by fear, right? And there's nothing, you cannot go broke betting on the spinelessness of Republican elected politicians. And until they fear someone more greatly than they fear Donald Trump, they're going to continue to do what they're going to do. And precisely because they need the House, which the votes in the House, which they don't have, thanks to Speaker Johnson, until they get a sufficient number in both houses to overcome a veto, they're basically just these Republicans. I mean, I hope they do more of this, but what they're really doing is they're triggering the ire of President Trump without any foreseeable upside. And so there's a limit to what they're going to be able to do, and the limit to their stomach for it. But if all of a sudden they want to show courage, God bless them.
Terry Schenkman wants to know from you, George, do you expect Trump to target you and other staff of the Lincoln Project? And if so, do you have a defense plan?
I don't have a defense plan other than whatever he pulls up is going to be meritless. My finances are simple. It won't. I don't fear him. And I think one of the things that that people don't quite understand about Trump, but they really should, is the fact that he's a bully and he wants to pick on people who won't fight back. All right. He picks, I mean, for example, you see all these law firms. All these big name law firms that have marginal connections at best to some of the people he has issues with. Like, for example, Perkins Coie. His real problem with Perkins Coie is, well, 2 things. One was there was this fellow who had some involvement in the Russia investigation. And then there's Mark Elias, who also did have some he also had some involvement in some of the early goings on that led to the Steele dossier and so on and so forth. Those people are gone from the law firm. He has yet to go after Mark Elias individually. who has his own law firm now. And that's because Elias would just go on television and say, yeah, come at me. And attack Trump and make him look weak. And, you know, I that may be the reason why he hasn't gone after me. I don't know. Maybe because I'll just go on television. I'll just say, you're a moron. And you got nothing, dude. Come at me.
Sarah, Craig has a question for you. He says, I admire the work that you've been doing at the Bulwark, but why do you think your efforts have not had greater success in convincing Republicans? You may want to challenge that premise, but go ahead.
Well, I'll challenge the premise in this way. One is, I think that over the last decade now, because Trump's been with us for about a decade, there have been a ton of Mitt Romney, John McCain voters who have politically realigned into the Democratic Party. And they have traded. I've talked about this political realignment a lot. And I'm sure you know lots of these people. It's why Trump doesn't do as well in the suburbs, but he puts up Saddam Hussein level numbers out in more rural communities. But he is also doing better with Black voters, Hispanic voters. And a lot of those voters who now vote for Trump, there's like a few different key elements about them. One is many of them were not in the political system before at all. Like they are Trump only voters. So one of the reasons that Donald Trump won and, Democrats like Alyssa Slotkin or Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, and they also won is because people would turn out, just vote for Trump and leave. And so those people aren't Republicans. They're just Trump voters. And then there's another category of people that I would call not Republicans at all. They're just red-pilled. Now, what does red-pilled mean? Red-pilled is what Elon is, or what RFK Jr. is, or what Tulsi Gabbard is. What Donald Trump has in common with all of those people is that they were all once Democrats not that long ago, basically before the last decade. And they've all become basically, they are living on a backlash against the Democrats, saying that they're woke or they're this or they're that. But all the cranks have moved into the Republican Party, and they're not Republicans by any real stretch of the imagination. They don't believe in limited government, free markets, and American leadership in the world. They believe in owning the libs, and they believe in Donald Trump and a bunch of other sort of crank things. And so I think that we speak for a real category of sort of voters that now we could call red dog Democrats. And I think a lot more of those people should start running in places where Democrats don't normally contest elections in redder places. I think these former Republicans should go run as Democrats, as new kinds of sort of sane Democrats. And so I think the problem is that the people that Donald Trump has been able to bring into his coalition, they're not Republicans. He's just built a very wide coalition that sort of transcends politics, that are made up of a cult and made up of people who wanted lower prices or think he's a businessman or saw him on TV.
You are a former Republican. Are you still a Republican, or can you call yourself that?
No, I mean, look, I haven't changed much at all in terms of my policy beliefs, but the Republican Party as it's constituted now doesn't reflect my beliefs at all. I believe in free speech. Donald Trump sues pollsters who put out polls that he doesn't like. Now, they talk a big game about free speech, but nobody has been more anti-free speech than Donald Trump. I believe in free markets, free trade. Donald Trump wants to run regressive tariffs. I believe in the rule of law. Donald Trump absolutely doesn't. He believes in breaking the law. So all of the things that ever made me a conservative, one of them being character counts, decency matters. One of the things about Donald Trump, like being a never Trump Republican, or why I never for 1 second doubted how I felt about him, wasn't a policy issue. Donald Trump's a bad person. And I don't mean a flawed person. Like, we're all flawed. And any political leader is going to be flawed. Donald Trump is like a walking, talking, like version of malign intent. He doesn't care about anybody. And so when you have a bad person as president, you will get bad outcomes, which is what's happening. And so, I've got nothing in common with today's Republican Party. And frankly, the Democrats are at least going to defend Ukraine. They're going to defend the rule of law. And so I'm an American. Like, people get pretty obsessed with this idea of like, do you still consider yourself a Republican, or are you a Democrat? And I'm like, I really love American liberal democracy. I think it's really important. I'd like to defend it. And I'm kind of going to line up with anybody else who's willing to do that.
George, several people have asked one or another version of this question. Do you think that oligarchs, whether they are in the United States or in Russia, are really the ones behind these tariffs, because it says if this person thinks one person, one of the many people, thinks that they could be creating huge windfalls when they get tipped off to things in advance.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think I don't really buy conspiracy theories, and I think they're just making the world more complicated, making Donald Trump's mind more complicated than it has to be. I mean, for example, I sold all my equities, every single nickel of it, all the money that I made practicing law all those years, and that I didn't give up in my divorce. I sold I sold every nickel of those equities 8 weeks ago. Not because I had any inside information, but because I can watch. I know this guy. I've watched this guy. I listen to him. And I know that he is going to engage in destructive conduct, conduct that's going to hurt people, conduct that's going to hurt investment in the United States. So no, I don't think that there are oligarchs behind these tariff decisions. I think it's all about his ego, all about his personal belief that somehow he can remake the world with tariffs, and if or punish people who he thinks deserve punishment. I mean, he referred to the tariffs within the last 48 hours as a war against the world. Well, that's the way he thinks.
Sarah, Bruce has a question for you. It says, in your focus groups, do you hear concerns expressed about the rule of law, or is that basically a non-issue out there? He says he's asking this because he's frankly terrified by attacks by Trump and his administration on law and the judiciary. Without the rule of law, the American experiment is basically over. That's his comment here. But the question is clear enough.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats are concerned about the rule of law, but the thing you have to understand about people who are either red-pilled or they're Trump supporters, and they live in a right-wing media ecosystem in which they will tell you that the law was abused to go after Trump, that was lawfare, that the DOJ was corrupt, and that they, went after Trump with all those court cases, and they're just trying to get him. And so, I do this on democracy too. I'm sure we've talked about this because I've been with you guys a bunch of times. But back in 2020, people would ask me, "What do voters think about democracy?" And I would say, like, "Well, they don't think about democracy." Like going into 2020, but then after January 6th, and by 2022, they cared about democracy, but democracy was polarized. So if you asked a Republican who's the biggest threat to democracy, they would say Joe Biden because he stole the election in 2020. You ask a Democrat, they would say, well, Republicans are the biggest threat because they attacked the Capitol and refused to accept the results. By 2024, democracy, actually, people think that Democrats are pretty anti-democracy because they didn't have an election in 2024, like for their primary. They just had Kamala Harris, and so you hear this from voters where, they're just, you might say like, well, rule of law means like one thing to you, but I will tell you that there's an alternative universe that most red-pilled Republicans, Trump supporters live in now. It's an entirely different media ecosystem, and they are there to tell all of their listeners and all of their voters that it is Democrats who are abusing the rule of law.
Yeah, I mean, to follow up on that, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, and I want to talk about the rule of law. I want to do nothing but talk about the rule of law. But what's the rule of law? The rule of law says that two people who are similarly situated, but maybe on different sides of the political fence, if they do the same thing or the equivalent, they will be treated the same way. But that requires a common set of facts to be able to say, well, this guy did this, he's a Democrat, and he got this. And this guy did this, he's a Republican, he should also get the same fate. If you don't have a common set of facts, you can't really argue with people who are basically deluded into thinking that the rules aren't applied equally.
Larry wants to know, what power will Congress have if the Democrats regain the House and or the Senate at the midterms? What will they be able to accomplish? George, I'll put that one to you.
Well, again, they're not going to ever have the votes to pass legislation over President Trump's veto. But what they could do is they could use the fact that they have a majority to block things that Trump might want to pass and use that as leverage to get things that they want done. The problem with that is that Trump doesn't appear to be willing to rely on legislation to accomplish his ends. He is usurping the power, the Article 1 powers of Congress, ignoring statutes as they exist, writing executive orders that are contrary to statutes. So there's a limit to what Congress can do if it's not willing basically to stop funding the government. But that only plays into his hands. So there's a limit. I mean, there's just a limit to what Congress is going to be able to do in this environment.
So was the senator right to not allow the government to be shut down, as had been advocated by a lot of Democrats?
I'm a bit of two minds of that. I think there's they definitely need to be doing something. They need to be appearing to be doing something. They need to be making the case that what is happening is wrong. And Chuck Schumer is thoroughly incapable of doing that. Shutting down the government, you want to have Trump blamed for that. You don't want to be the one who's doing it for him. So I understand the hesitancy in not, voting for a spending bill. On the other hand, they have to find some manner in which to express their concern about the what's going on. I think Cory Booker did a nice job with getting attention for his holding the floor for 24 hours. I think a number of members of Congress did a very nice job at the protests that were held on Saturday. And I think they need to do more of that. And I think they also need to do more town halls, which the Republicans are now afraid of doing, to basically say, no, we're here. Here's what's going on. Here's how what Trump is doing affects you. And here's how it's helping Elon Musk, a billionaire. Okay, this is corruption. And they have to, it's kind of like what Navalny and his people did in Russia. They would show the corruption. And that's part of what the Democrats have to do.
Sarah, a lot of people have asked this question. Trump blatantly breaks the law. His close supporters, including Elon Musk, blatantly spread false news, and yet there appear to be no consequences. Why does this permissive culture exist within the Republican Party, its voters and judges on the Supreme Court, and elected politicians?
Well, look, I actually think this relates to the last question you asked about Schumer. So here's the thing. Schumer could have pursued the shutdown strategy if he thought he could convince the American people that it was Donald Trump's fault. You do not have a communications ecosystem or talented communicators of the caliber in the Democratic Party that give them the confidence to take big swings because they don't feel like they can message to the American people about it. And until they figure out how to talk directly to the American people, I mean, and this is like, there's been endless conversations about this, about the media ecosystem, about Democrats' communications ability. But until they figure out that we live in a new communications environment that requires direct, authentic communications with voters, not stupid TikTok videos, like as legislators, that they can go to the public and make a case for these things. I mean, I'm watching the chat, I'm watching the questions, and the questions are all some version of like, how do you get Republicans to think a thing? Mm-hmm. And they're also asking me what red pilled is. And I'll tell you, like, Elon's red pilled. Elon is somebody who's so torqued up about trans issues that he's decided everything, Dems are awful and Republicans are good because they don't like trans people. It's like they get spun around the axle about some of these social issues and they lose sight of anything else that matters. But the reason that Schumer couldn't go hard at that is because Schumer doesn't know how to communicate effectively. He's not the guy for the moment. And so until the Democrats basically, I think, have like a real turnover. So like right now I'm watching somebody like Mallory McMorrow. Mallory Morrow understands what time it is. She understands that you got to speak authentically to people and say what's, I mean, this sounds cheesy. Why was Cory Booker even effective? Cory Booker's not like AOC. He doesn't share Bernie's politics. Why was he's not, he just said what was happening. He reflected back people's anxieties, what they're seeing, the insanity of it. You're asking a question, why isn't Trump being held accountable? Because there's not an effective opposition party. And the reason that Democrats, their numbers are so low, it's not because Republicans hate them. It's because their own party thinks they're deeply ineffectual. And so until they solve that problem, until they figure out not how to become influencers or TikTok stars or make little slick videos, till they figure out how to talk to the American people and make a case for themselves, they're not going to be able to do this stuff effectively.
Miriam says, or asked, why do you think Trump is using anti-Semitism as a cudgel to demand changes on college and university campuses? George?
I think he'll use any cudgel he can get his hands on to punish the people he wants to punish. He does not like the intellectual elite in this country. He does not like them because they look down upon him. He knows they look down upon him. He knows that these universities wouldn't give him the time of day. I mean, he had to cheat to get into Penn. And so he chooses to rely on their vulnerability. And one of the vulnerabilities was how they handled protests last year after October 7th. And so that's a cudgel he's willing to use. It doesn't matter to him what tool he uses. None of it means anything to him. All it means is the only thing that means anything to him is whether or not he's drawing blood. And he can use that as a cudgel against these universities.
Sarah Catherine wants to know, what are non-MAGA Republicans saying in your focus groups?
There's not like a bright line as much as there used to be around non-MAGA Republicans, because a lot of those people moved into the Democratic Party over the last however long period of time. And I would say that like a lot of the people who are non-MAGA are also non-Republicans. Like a lot of the Black voters and Hispanic voters and younger voters that have moved toward Trump do so because mainly Democrats don't appeal to them. And they like the cultural posturing. One of the things that I think is really deeply true is that Trump won the culture by a lot more than he won the vote. Because voters want a really strong economy, and they want somebody with an aggressive approach on these things. Like, people are looking for somebody who is not a regular politician. And Democrats are going to have to figure this out because their voters want this too. Their voters want somebody who's not a regular politician. They want somebody who transcends politics and seems larger than life and knows how to talk to them and knows how to communicate with them. So, the non-MAGA folks tend to be people, like I said, who just vote on the economy, maybe don't like Trump's personality, but sort of feels like something needs to be done, feels like we've been stuck as a country, feels like we've been stagnant, feels like Democrats aren't offering them something. And really they do get frustrated by a lot of these social issues. I mean, I'm sure you've heard a million people tell you that trans prison ad was effective, but the trans prison ad was effective, not because of just trans issues and prison issues and what your tax dollars are going to, but because people are really uneasy about where sort of left-wing culture took them. And you do get a lot of people who think, the way that liberals and the protests on college campuses, like that they felt like there was a lot of anti-Semitism there. And so, I think Democrats they've got a lot of work to do to like talk like normal people and address people where they are. And they got to stop dying. Like, some of it's really simple. Like, you got to be more popular than the other guys. And so like stop taking unpopular positions.
We have come to the end of the program, and there is a tradition on this program to ask at the very end if you can say anything that would give people a reason to be optimistic and leave the program with a smile on their faces. And George, let me ask you to do that one first, if you can.
You're muted, bud.
Look, I think I was heartened by the size of these protests on Saturday. I am heartened by the fact that what we saw, I went to the one in DC, was very broad based. I mean, it wasn't about traditional liberal issues. There were plenty of people waving hands off my body signs and some LGBTQ signs, but that's fine. But there were also people waving the flag of Greenland and saying that we hands off Canada and talking about tariffs. I mean, it was a festivus of grievance, if you will. And it just shows that, we may all have our priorities, but Trump is attacking so many things that so many people value at once that he's actually creating a coalition against himself and against MAGA. And the question is can some talented politician of the sort that Sarah is describing, can somebody take advantage of that and win back the country for democracy?
Sarah, we're basically out of time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say it really fast. Look, Democrats, because Trump was a threat to democracy, Democrats kind of got boxed into defending old creaky institutions. And the fact is, people want something new. And here's the thing. Donald Trump's going to tear everything down. He's going to rip everything apart. That means that hopefully he's going to flame out by the end of this. He's going to be deeply unpopular, and there may be much less appetite for not just him, but somebody like him. And if that happens, that means we get to rebuild. And I don't think we have to be attached to a lot of what came before. I think we should start thinking about how do we win elections, because it's the only thing that matter. Winners make policy, losers go home. So we have to figure out how to win elections, and then we get to build whatever the future looks like. And, you should let that light you up.
Sarah Longwell, George Conway, thank you both very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I know our audience has enjoyed it greatly. Thanks so much. We're going to be back next week, and be sure to check that one out. The person is going to be John Michaels with Madeline Brand, talking about a vigilante nation, the subversion of American democracy. That's next week. Have a good night. Thanks a lot for being with us.